Okay.
Depending on how quick we get out of here. Why can't Kayla make an agreement during office hours?
Because she has practice.
I don't know if I have any time today, to be honest, because I've got a meeting with him, and I have a meeting with Richard, and I have to finish prepping the lecture notes. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Okay. So, we are going to have a quick look at chapter 13. It's quite interesting in the exercise physiology class this week. The new edition of the textbook has a brand new chapter called Exercise is Medicine. And one of the topics that it covers is the benefit of exercise to certain cancers. So my week is tying in very nicely together. So my plan is not to go through the whole chapter. Hopefully you've read that and you've picked up some of the information about how cancers spread. But what I wanted to do was concentrate on some of the lifestyle type cancers and look at some of the, look in more detail at some of the information around there. I can't remember what activity we have set up for Friday. Maybe it's something aerobic that would go along with the other information from my other class. So, any questions before I get started here?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Let's have a look. I've got some really, really good web links for you. Hopefully they'll also provide you with some useful info. So, we're going to look at some of the risk factors. I want to particularly concentrate on the tobacco cancers and UV rays, I think. Those are the two that I want to make the most time for, because I think that those are ones that we see your population run quite a big risk for. I know when I take students out to the playground, I always ask them to make sure that they are wearing sunscreen, and then when we get to the playground and I ask if anyone has sunscreen on, not very many people have used it. So I know that the sunscreen thing is a bit underused, so we'll look at that, and then tobacco stuff. So the risk factors. So risk factors we can't control, right? So genetics, getting older, whether I'm male or female, right? These are things I have no control over, but I can control what I do in my lifestyle that could impact genetic factors, right? So, you know, we might have a gene for a certain cancer, but it's something that I do that turns that gene on, right? And if I hadn't engaged in that behavior or lived in that environment, that gene might have stayed dormant and I wouldn't have developed the cancer, for example. Okay. So the things that I've got control of are using tobacco in one form or another, what kind of diet I predominantly eat, right? Not like 100% of the time. We're not saying you've got to be careful every single minute, but the overall picture of your diet, right, is what's important. Same with physical activity. The overall picture of your physical activity. Are you regularly active, right? Doesn't mean if you skip a day or you skip 2 or 3 days that that's a problem, but the big picture. And weight management can also substantially affect the risk of certain cancers. So we've got, as I said, we've got these ones we can't control, and then we've got things we can do to make sure that we're being as risk-free as possible. Okay? So, tobacco. So there's a table 13.2 in this chapter, gives you a list of, let me find it here, which page is it? Table. Here we go. Table 13.2, it's on page 436, and that table lists the types of cancers that could be caused by tobacco. So, you know, we kind of assume lung cancer, particularly if we're a smoker, not a chewer, right? But if you look at that list, I think there are some in that list that would surprise you, like kidney cancer can be linked to tobacco use, right? So it's not just the obvious lung cancer or oral type cancers if you chew tobacco, right? And some of the symptoms for lung cancer are pretty unpleasant. So it often goes hand in hand with, brain fart, emphysema. Right? So the risk when you're looking at tobacco really is cumulative over time. So how many times a day do you use tobacco? How many years have you been using tobacco? If you're a smoker, do you inhale the smoke or do you just like smoke and breathe it straight back out? And the tar level of the tobacco can be important. Right? So here's a picture of what lung tissue should look like, right? And here's a picture of what a smoker's lung is going to look like, because that tar from the cigarette kind of gunks up the lung tissue. And lung tissue is very delicate, right? It's real soft and it can get damaged very easily. So, you know, that once that's done, it's difficult to undo it. Now there is some positive news when you look at quitting smoking, for example. If you can quit, then you're after 10 years, so if you can go 10 years free, and giving up smoking is really hard. Like my mum was a heavy smoker, and my sister is now vaping because she's convinced that that's better than the cigarettes. I remain cynical. We'll find out probably in another 10 or 15 years whether vaping is better for you than smoking, than the original smoking. But you know, it's my mum and my sister tried multiple times to quit, and it's really, really hard to give up smoking. Now, my dad was a smoker when he was younger, but he did manage to give up. So he hasn't smoked for, I can't remember, I was pretty small when he quit. So if you can give up for 10 years, then your risk of lung cancer is down to about half of that of your peer group who continue to smoke, right? So that's, you know, 50% less risk is a big number, right? Your cardiovascular disease risk lowers within a year, right? So your chances of getting a clot or some kind of stroke or something like that, it only takes a year, right? And depending again on the level of tobacco use, then your risk can be back to typical within anywhere from 3 to 15 years, depending upon this load that you use, right? So 30% of cancer deaths and 87% of lung cancer deaths can be attributed to tobacco use, right? Those numbers should go down over the next set of database examinations, because generally across the population, the prevalence of smoking has declined. Now, in this area of the country, I notice a huge amount of chew use, and it's for sale everywhere. That wasn't something I had ever seen before I came to New Mexico. And, you know, chew is just as much of a risk as smoking, right? It's just a different type of cancer, but it's pretty damaging. Right? You probably saw that picture of that young man. I know they have one in here of him. I can't think what his name is. I'm sure I had a picture of him in here. There we go. So there's a very famous young man who started chewing quite young, and he, you know, thought there was no risk, and then he developed really bad cancer in his mouth, and then it ate into his jaw, and so he has been at the forefront of providing support and trying to get, why can't I find it? Oh, that's frustrating. Oh, it might have been in chapter 8, the picture. So this links very tightly to chapter 8 with the tobacco and alcohol use. And I think the picture is in chapter 8, so go back and have a look there. He's been, or he was, I'm not sure if he's still alive, he was doing a lot of media work, a lot of talks to school children, trying to explain to them that, you know, what was left of his face was down to tobacco chew. So it isn't safer because you're not smoking it, it's just a different form of risk. And then we've got, you know, someone who lives with a smoker. So when I was little, my parents both smoked in the house. And passive smoking is also linked to an increase in lung cancer. which kind of isn't fair if I'm not the one smoking. I didn't choose that lifestyle, and yet technically I was at more risk because they were smoking. Right? And that's, you know, that's the argument behind preventing smokers from smoking in restaurants anymore, or in movie theaters, or on aeroplanes, right? And I know, like, I can remember having a conversation with my mum that she felt that her right was being infringed because she couldn't sit at the table after a nice meal and have a cigarette with her coffee. She had to go out and stand in the rain to have her cigarette. And it made her really mad. And it was very difficult to have a logical conversation with her that everybody else around the table doesn't want their meal wrecked by the taste of her cigarette smoke, right? So there is, you know, you have to be careful to try to see both sides of the argument, but the health risk, in my view, has to outweigh that individual's right to that behavior. And other people are going to argue with me about that. I mean, that's how I feel on it. So by chewing, then we're at risk of larynx, oral cavity, and esophagus type cancers. You get often people who are chewing tobacco get heartburn quite often, and that can be an indication of the start of esophageal cancer. The good, if there's such a thing as good thing about oral cancer tumors, is that they're readily identifiable. They often get picked up on your dental check, for example. The dentist is often the person that says, ooh, that wasn't there the last 6 months ago when you came in. You better get that checked, right? They do metastasize very quickly. So this is not something to go, oh, it's just a blister, or it's just a, you know, it's just a bump, it'll go away. If there's anything in your mouth that is new and unusual, it's very important that you get it checked quickly, right? Because they spread very fast. And I just wanted to show you this link. It's over here. As a happy circumstance, April is Oral Cancer Awareness Month. There is some recent research that indicates that an increasing percentage of oral cancers are associated with the HPE virus, which enters the mouth during oral sex. So if you're having oral sex with someone who is infected with the HPE virus, then that can start oral cancer. But also this chewing tobacco. That's an aside. That's not obviously related to the chew. Right? So it's important to get screened. There's lots of information you can see here. There's many tabs along the top that have tons of information on them. So if you're worried about something, or you're worried about a friend or a family member, you can go and get some more information. Information is power, right? The more information, the more I understand, the more I know about something, the more I have the tools to make good decisions, right? I have a note to refer you to 13.8. Let's have a look there. Oh, yes, there is a picture of, on page 440, there's a picture of someone who has a cancerous tumor on their tongue. Right, so that's the kind of thing you want to look out for. Anything that's new, that wasn't there, right? If you brush your teeth in the morning in front of a mirror, use that time to just kind of check around, have a look, make sure everything's the same, right? Because the key is always, with cancers, the key is always pick them up early, right? So they don't have to be a death sentence if you pick them up early. I was 27 when I had cancer. I was lucky that I picked it up very early. I had a lump in my breast, picked it up really early. It got chopped out. I had some chemo, and 30 years later, here I am, right? And I've never had any more trouble. But it was because I caught it really, really early. It had not had chance to spread. Okay, so this is personal to me because I've done it. I've been there, right? And just the checking. Do your personal checking on a regular basis. Right? So as I said, in that list, in that table, there are cancers there that we wouldn't necessarily consider, right? So I have to say, I mean, I've never smoked. My drug is alcohol. And I had never considered the idea that kidney or bladder cancer could be connected to tobacco until I read this chapter, right, when I first started teaching this class. So what happens is that the carcinogens, the toxins that you inhale, enter the bloodstream, and then they have to get moved out of the body via the kidneys and the bladder. So you want to keep an eye on whether there's any blood in urine, or if a parent says, oh, something, oh, you'll never guess what, you know, just listen for the signs, right? If there's someone is urinating very frequently, that can be a sign of diabetes, but it can also be a sign of bladder cancer, right? Men are at more risk of these kinds of cancers than women typically. Pancreatic cancer is tricky because the symptoms for pancreatic cancer are a bit vague, and they seem, you know, they could be all number of things, and so unless you are very careful, you don't kind of put them together as, oh, it could be a problem with the pancreas. And by the time you're jaundiced, because you know, you've got yellowing of your eyeballs and your skin, and pain and weight loss, by that point, the pancreatic tumor has advanced a long way. So picking up these early symptoms is key, because by the time you get ill, it's a much bigger problem to try to deal with, right? Obesity or severe overweight, being sedentary, and diabetes are other risk factors for pancreatic cancer. So the numbers, I hate statistics when we talk about cancer. I remember people would bandy about numbers and statistics when I was going through my treatment, and I just didn't want to hear it. I'm like, I'm not a statistic, I'm going to do my thing, I'm an individual, I can change, you know, my approach, but the numbers of people with advanced pancreatic cancer who survive are very, very small. Right? So it is one that you want to really take care of. have a quick look at some that are connected with our diet, because that's a very readily available life choice that you can change quite easily. So dietary components can raise the risk of certain cancers and lower the risk for other cancers. So colorectal cancer is the 3rd deadliest in the States. It does have a strong genetic component. So it is one of those that, you know, maybe if other family members have had colorectal cancer, then that's a red flag to you to make sure that your diet is as beneficial as possible, right? So you want to make sure that you're eating plenty of what we used to call roughage, right? So the starchy vegetables, you know, you don't have to take the skins off your potatoes or your carrots when you're cooking them, right? The skin is good for your digestive system, right? You're not going to use it for energy, but it has other benefits. The symptoms for colorectal is going to depend where in the colon the tumor is placed, right? So again, just pay attention, learn your body. You know your body better than anybody else, and so you can pick up signs where things have changed a little bit. Stomach cancer is very closely linked to diets. IBS, so having inflammatory bowel disease, family history, as I said, of polyps and things like that. Regular exercise is really good, making sure that your diet has plenty of starchy type things, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, right? Eat less red meat. No one says eat no red meat, but try to replace some red meat with some fish, for example, and less saturated fats. Okay. Diets that are high in fat are also linked with these kinds of cancers. Some people will say diets that are high in alcohol and low in fruits, smoking cigarettes, right? Just lifestyle choices that we know maybe aren't as sensible as we could do, right? It's not rocket science. Little changes that we can do. Okay, and then ultraviolet radiation, our sunshine. So here we're at 4,000 feet, right? And that's significantly closer to the sun than living in London at sea level, right? So we have to be very careful when we are outside, right? It's just sensible to use some form of sunscreen, okay? So it doesn't matter what kind of UV rays you're being exposed to, they're all harmful, they all have a possibility of causing cancer. If I have a tan, right, we all like to go out and get a tan. It feels nice, and you look and you're like, oh yeah, I've got a nice tan now. But a tan means that you've damaged your skin, right? So again, you've got to weigh the options. Maybe don't tan so dark, right? Don't do so much damage. The ultraviolet radiation in sunlight, so when I'm out working in the garden, or I'm hiking in the mountains, or I'm at the beach, right? Then that UV exposure means that your skin is more likely to wrinkle, right? So as you get older, you'll have wrinkles earlier, and you're much more likely to develop some kind of skin cancer. Tanning parlors that say they only use UVB rays and that will protect you, like their beds are safe and you can't develop skin cancer. That is not true. Those claims are false. And UVC radiation is generated by artificial UV sources, and that's highly potent cancer-causing radiation. So tanning beds are not a safe option to get a tan, right? Maybe spray or use a cream, right? Those are safe. So what are skin cancers that we want to take particular attention to the signs of? Because again, if I can catch it early, then it doesn't have to be deathly, right? So basal cell carcinoma is the most common cancer of the skin. It's slow growing. It doesn't spread very often. And it frequently turns up on parts of the skin that are often out in the sun, like the backs of your hands, or your nose, or the back of your neck, if you've got short hair, right? Those kind of areas. About 60% of skin cancers are basal cell. So they look like little moles or pimples, so if you get, a new mole on the back of your hand that wasn't there, and then go get it checked, particularly if it's got a kind of ring around it, right? Squamous cell carcinomas are not like a mole, they're not raised up, they're flat. Often they're red. It's the second most common type of skin cancer, particularly in individuals who have paler skins. Right? It develops in the same kind of areas that the basal cell does, so backs of your hands, your nose, chin, back of your neck, anywhere that's out in and exposed. Right? So about 30% of skin cancers are squamous. So 60% are basal cell, 30% are squamous. They're relatively easy to deal with. The last 10% are malignant melanomas. They're the most common in Caucasian males. Males are at a much higher risk than females. Generally because they tend to be the ones, I think, who are doing outside work, right? The highest, it's a high risk for people who have pale skin, pale light blue eyes, pale hair, right? They get sunburned very easily, and that tends to turn to freckles rather than tanning. Right, so that's a group of people who need to be very, very careful when they're outside, right? Malignant melanoma is the cancer, although it's the smallest percentage of skin cancers, it is the one that is most likely to spread and to cause death, right? People who get very badly sunburned as children. So I can remember going on holiday as a child, and my parents used to buy sun oil. It was like cooking oil, and they would just lie out in the sun and get as dark as they possibly could every summer. And we got burned quite a lot as children, you know, so that's a problem. It's important to take care of. People know that now. You know, we know a lot more than we did 50 years ago. The children at the Child Development Center all have their own little sunscreen bottles, and they teach them to put their sunscreen on before they go out on the playground every day, which is really cute. So they're important, right? And that ABCD is in the book. So check ABCD. Where is it? ABCD. It is on page. I can't find it. I'll find it and I'll put it back up. Something to pay attention to. So, if you are a person of color, then I've had many conversations, particularly when I was working in Alabama, right? My students were, a large number of my students were black, and I would say, do you have your sunscreen? And they would say, they would laugh at me, and they're like, Dr. Wall, do you see the color of my skin? Like, no, that doesn't prevent you from getting skin cancer, right? It might lower the risk, but the problem is that for many of these cancers, you can't pick them up, right? What a white person can notice, right? Because, ooh, that's different, right? If I've got very dark skin, then I may not see some of these cancers, right? And so then we're at higher risk. Wear your sunscreen, right? It doesn't matter if you're green or purple, wear your sunscreen, right? That's the only way. Wear a hat, wear sunglasses, wear long sleeves, wear long pants if you're working out in the garden, if you're going hiking, right? Hat, big brim, sunglasses, long sleeves, long pants. I just actually bought sun gloves for paddleboarding because I don't even want my hands out, right? So, take care. So how can we prevent, particularly number 3, because that's the one that's the most risky, right? We need to limit our sun exposure. We need to use sunscreen. Now the FDA has some really interesting information about sunscreens and about tanning beds. So the FDA has a rule in place that tanning beds have to have warning signs on them. They've just released last year, they came out with a new statement that said that they're no longer supporting the use of chemical sunscreens, and that the only sunscreen that they are prepared to say is safe at this point in time are sunscreens that are zinc oxide based. So that's brand new last year. And I've already said, you know, pay attention to protective clothing. And here's something, right, here's an interesting diagram. So if you look at this globe, and here's the equator, the closer to the equator we are, the more risk we're at for radiation, right? So New Mexico's not that far away, and altitude, right? The higher we are, the closer we are to the sun. The smaller the barrier between us and the sun. Right? So being in New Mexico puts us at quite a big risk for ultraviolet radiation and skin cancers. Okay. And let me show you this one. So if you go down to the notes under that slide, there are 3 different links there that have huge amounts of information about sunscreen. This is one of them. Right, so this is the FDA website, and there's a quiz there, so you can play, you could do with your nieces and nephews, or if you're going into a school system, or you're going to work with kids at a recreation center. For example, there's a little quiz that you can use to find out how much they know. There's a little video there, and then there's some links that are talking about how to store your sunscreen, because that's something else we all do, and I'm guilty of this. You know, we buy a big bottle of sunscreen one summer, and 3 summers later we're still using the same bottle of sunscreen, right? That's not a good plan. It tells you about SPF, expiration dates, talks about sunscreens from other countries, so that's quite interesting, because I tried to buy some sunscreen from the UK recently that was zinc, wasn't a chemical one, and I couldn't buy it. They can't ship it here, so that's quite interesting. So there's just, you know, tips to stay safe, how to apply and store it. Don't forget the tops of your feet, because the burnt feet is the most painful thing. Right? So there's all this cool info here that you could build into your lesson plans, or build into a little game with, as I said, if you're going to work with kids perhaps at a recreation center, or with your own children. Right? So I've highlighted those 3 just because I think they're particularly relevant to us as a population, but there are several other kinds of cancers that are discussed in this chapter. Please learn to do breast exams and testicle exams. Those are really important, right? As I said, you know your body better than anyone. Learn how to do those self-exams. Do them at least once a month when you're in the shower. Right? And that was my info on chapter 13. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
No.
So I think the big take-home message is self-examination, right? Keep an eye on the toilet, make sure there's no blood there. Think about your diet, right? Learn how to do a breast exam or a testicle exam. You know, understand what the symptoms are for certain cancers, and just, you know, just be aware of your body, really. That's what it comes down to, right? Be aware, pay attention. Don't put something off, right? That's what my mum did, and her cancer spread, right? And I didn't put it off, and here we are, right? So enjoy the rest of the day. We may get some rain today, which is very exciting. That would be nice. Friday, I can't remember what the activity is on Friday, so I'll have a look at the syllabus, and I'll see you Friday at 9. We'll either be doing something that maybe a few of us can do together, or there'll be some activity for you to go and try on your own. Okay?
All right, Dr. Wall.
Have a good day.
You too, bye.